How's it going, everybody? Today I'm going to show you how to build a cheap, easy little chicken coop. For this chicken coop, I'm just going to use 2x2 furring strips. They're cheap, they're light, it'll be easy to move, and it'll save me a lot of money. I've already cut 4 of them in half, so now I have 8 4-foot pieces. I'm going to put 45-degree angles on both ends. It's nice to do more than one at a time, but sometimes it's a lot easier to hold it in place if you do one. I'm using a miter saw in this, and a lot of people don't have that. Well, you don't need a miter saw to do something like this. You can do it with a hand saw if you want. The only thing that's really tricky is getting a 45-degree cut. I'll show you how to do that. If you don't have a miter saw, you can easily mark 45 degrees for a cut. With a speed square, there's a 45-degree angle. Go to the corner of your 45-degree angle, now you mark a square line on the other side. As long as you follow this line with your saw and this line with your saw, you will have a square 45-degree cut. If I start cutting and I'm only cutting along this line, I could easily be cutting at an angle like that or like that. But if I cut along this line and I make sure that my saw stays in line with this line the entire time, I'll have a true square 45-degree cut. Just like that. These 3 2x2s are going to make up the ridge beam and the 2 bottom sides. I wanted to keep this chicken coop light and portable so we could move it around the yard or property if we wanted to. So I'm laying them out to a 32-inch stud spacing. That way there will be 2 ends and then 2 supports in the middle. I have this laid out the way it's going to set. This is going to be kind of like a ridge beam down the center. I'm going to take a measurement across here for the 2 ends. So I need 2 cut as 70 inches. I'm using some scrap 1/2-inch plywood to make gussets for tying these corners together. You could use whatever scrap lumber you've got laying around. I don't think it's worth buying plywood for these 6 gussets. Once I had the first one cut, I used that as a template for the others. Should be able to cut this in half and get 2 of them out of this. Put this at a 45. Here I'm just cutting the corners off so they don't stick up past the boards. This is the top gusset. It sits right below the ridge beam to help support it while you're putting it together. And once the ridge beam's in, I screwed those rafter 2x2s to the ridge beam as well. I started off with 2 screws in each corner until all the corners were put together. Then I went back and added 2 more screws to each corner. That way I had 4 screws and it can't shift one way or the other. That's what the front's going to look like. The second one had to be the exact same thing as the first one, so I already had the measurement for my bottom board. I already had all the gussets cut, and I just had to screw it together, so it went together really quick. With the 2 ends finished, it's pretty easy to put this together. Just slide that ridge beam down until it hits the gusset, and then stand the other one up. Slide the ridge beam into that until it hits the gusset. But you want to put the gusset on the inside. You'll see in a second what I mean. One thing I noticed, because I'm kind of hurrying, this gusset should be on the inside. So I need to take these screws out, spin this around so that this is on the inside, so it's not holding up any of my chicken wire. That should be better. I put my layout marks on all these boards at the same time, but then I changed my mind and put this bottom board across, which means I need to cut 1.5 inches off of both ends of the two bottom boards. That way they'll butt up to this and the layout marks will stay the same. There's always mistakes when you're building stuff on the fly without plans. As long as you can fix them, it's not a big deal. Something to learn from every time. So far I've used 1 3/4 screws. I'm going to use 2 3/4 for the bottoms. Once you reach this point, it really starts to go together quick. There's not much to think about other than the door, and that's pretty simple too. This 1x2 is just going to be used for a little extra support for the centers. These boards are for the door opening. Now, if you care about centering your door, you might want to measure center, mark center on the bottom board and measure out, put your door to the size you want. I wasn't too worried about it, so I just put them wherever. I use a square to make them straight up and down, so they look somewhat decent though. The other end, I just put one board in the center going to the peak. That'll help support the peak and it'll give me something to staple the chicken wire to. I used a 2x4 as a spacer to hold the bottom of the door opening up a little bit. That way it can open without hitting grass, weeds, stuff like that that might be in the way. Just gives it a little clearance from the ground. About 16 by 14 3/4. I actually kind of decided to go a little bit smaller to make sure it can swing. So my door should end up being 14 3/4 by 15 3/4. I leave at least a 1/4 inch gap around the door in the opening. That way the door can open and close without hitting the edge of the frame. I'm sure this door would hold up just fine, being how small it is without a corner brace. I kind of want to do it just because. So I would say that this is not a necessity, more just I feel like doing it. I did notice that if you push down in the center, these flex out a bit.
So I'm going to add one brace across here. I'm putting it on top. That way if there's a bump on the ground that I'm moving it around, it's not sitting flat and making it teeter as much.
To attach my chicken wire, I'm using an air stapler. I think you could probably get it started using a regular hand stapler and then maybe pound some staples in, or put a piece of 1x2 over top of it and screw it down to hold it. But for me, I had this air stapler and it worked really well. Cut my wire to hang over a little bit, and then I wrapped it around and stapled it to the face to give it a little bit more hold. I'm not sure that was necessary, but I thought it might help. We actually already have a wooden chicken coop that they can sleep in. Our use for this is going to be sliding it up to the coop so they have something to go out into while they're small. And eventually they'll probably free range. If this was going to be your only coop, you'd probably want to drape some plastic over one end, maybe even just contractor bags, and staple them down so they have some shade and a way to get out of the rain. Maybe build a box in it or something. But for us, this is just temporary coop, something for while they're small, so I'm not going to go that far with it. I wrapped the wires around the end and stapled them down. It worked alright, but it still left a lot of ends that would stab you in the hands. So I'm covering those 1x2 furring strips. It'll look better, it'll keep you from getting stabbed in the hands, and it'll actually probably help hold the wires in place a little better.
I think I'll probably put one along this edge as well. That way that should cover all the sharp pieces of wire.
That piece of wire I cut out worked perfectly for covering the door. Normally, I would screw my hinges to the door while the door's laying down flat. It's much easier. I don't really know why I did it this way, but it did work. It's just a little harder because the door wants to move while you're trying to drill into it. I'm pretty happy with these 1x2s for trim. They look nice, they cover up the pokey wires, keep your hands protected, give it a nice little finished look. Now all that's left is the latch. Once the latch is on, we can throw some birds in this house and call it a day. I think Maple likes the chickens a lot more than they like her. I could see her spending a lot of time out here watching these birds. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this one, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.